It is the Final Word Cricket Podcast, Season 17, Episode 5. Adam Collins with you, and joining me today in the co-host chair for the first time, it's ESPNcricinfo's Alex Malcolm. Alex, wonderful to have you with us at the MCG in one of the commentary boxes. We've just watched Victoria win a Shield game, a hard-fought Shield game against New South Wales. Wouldn't want to be anywhere else at this time of year. Hello.
Magical place to be. Pleasure to be with you, Adam. Really thrilled. Long-time listener, first-time caller, for want of a better term. Jeff's enormous shoes are huge, hard to fill, both figuratively and literally. But
size 17s, yeah.
Yes. I'll try and do my best. So it's nice to be with a fellow girl that too, talking cricket.
That's nice. I'm obviously away from my kids this week and feeling every second of it. I know you and I, when we're on tour together, we have a lot of these types of conversations. I should note, by the way, that this is brought to you by Ambassador Cruise Line, giving you the chance to cruise with cricket legends this December. Bit of admin off the top, Alex, which I'll tell you about at the same time that I tell our listeners about. Our live shows that I've been banging away about for about a month now. So they're in Perth on the 21st of November, night before the India Test match. The 29th of November at Melbourne, the Capital Theatre, our biggest show yet. The Rhino Room in Adelaide on the 5th of December. The 12th of December at Brightside in Brisbane. And the 7th of January at the Comedy Store in Sydney. We've got a new bundle going, all right? So there's the normal ticket, which is $40, easy peasy, $35 if you're a patron. However, with the release of The Showman, Glenn Maxwell's book this week, which I co-authored with him, we've got the opportunity now to get a ticket to the show and a copy of the book signed by Maxie himself for $60 if you're a patron, or $65 if you are not. So essentially you save $10 from the book, because at the shops it'll be a certain price, probably around $35 or $36. In effect, it means you get The Showman for $25. That's all on the in the show notes now on the website where we're selling the tickets. But it's across all cities. Maxie's definitely going to be in Adelaide, definitely going to be in Melbourne. He'll probably be in Sydney. He won't be in Perth and Brisbane. However, he'll do the personalised signing of your book before we go to Perth and Brisbane and make it all nice for you. So if you want to hear Glenn Maxwell's story, a remarkable tale from when he shattered his leg, or it was around this time of year in 2022, through to when he made his astonishing 201 not out. You'll be able to read through those pages, his life more generally. You'll hear from Glenn himself when he comes on the pod later this week. Of course, you've had the chance to speak to Glenn ahead of its release and have read the pages already, but it's all tied in nicely with our live shows this summer.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I can't speak highly enough of the book, not just because you're sitting here. You've done an outstanding job with it.
Thank you.
I really do congratulate you on that. Writing a book is incredibly hard, having done it myself.
Yeah.
And Glenn's been outstanding. Well, I had a fascinating conversation with him last Friday, and looking forward to writing a little bit about that this week when the book is being released. But yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful read, and I cannot stress to your listeners enough to go and get that when it's out.
That's very kind of you. Yeah, The Showman, and you can pre-order it now, but you can get the actual book in shops. I think it's on Tuesday or Wednesday or something like that. But the best way to do it is to come to our live shows. The first time we've done a national tour. If you want to bring your cricket club, or you want to bring your work colleagues for an end of year Christmas do, get in touch. There's ways for us to do group bookings and that kind of thing. But shows all around the country for the first time. That's all in the show notes, with the bundle now available as well. The reason we're at the G and where we're going to start the show today, the great national conversations that always take place at this time of year around selection, but also a riveting round of Shield cricket. We've seen the Vics knock off New South Wales. So many Test players in action throughout the course of the last 4 days. Victoria getting the job done on morning 4. I'm not quite sure where to start this, other than to say we know a bit more about what the Australian team will look like than we did a week ago. We know Steve Smith is definitely going to bat number 4 in the first Test match at Perth, but we maybe have never known less about who's going to open the batting. I mean, what's your thoughts initially on where that's at as far as who's going to be out there with Usman Khawaja at Perth?
Yeah, I've been having some discussions around the place. My understanding is they haven't landed in a place yet. I think they've got an idea of which way they want to go, the Australian selectors, but I truly believe they haven't landed exactly where they want to be. And this selection panel has been on record, both publicly and briefed people privately, that they'll only make a decision when they have to. And that decision doesn't need to be made just yet. There's still a little bit of time. There's another Shield round and at least one Australia A game to get some more information from. But they will stress, unlike the public who love to talk about the bat-off, the national bat-off, which happens every year, the body of work that players put together and the style of cricketer that they want for the specific role they're looking for. They're looking for an opener, obviously. whether it's a left-hander, a right-hander, a guy who plays aggressively or not, that's all part of the conversation. I think the left-hand thing is a genuine part of the conversation, given Ashwin, if they picked a left-hander in Harris, Ashwin would get a look at 4 of the top 7 left-handers. If you throw Stark in there, it's 5 of the top 9. That's part of the equation, but then, facing Bumrah, facing Shami if he's fit, facing Siraj, that's all part of it. The pace of how that top 4 works together in terms of strike rate is a factor. It has been a discussion point. So all of that comes into the mix. But, yeah, it's been a fascinating round of Shield cricket, and there's been fascinating conversations going on in the background. I think one of the most underrated things coming out of this game is actually how well Mitchell started. And there's whispers out of the players from this game, and also the coaches even after the game just spoke about how good a nick he looks in.
And look, if you're a Marcus Harris fan, you would say the way he played Stark on day one adds to the case, right? But then you look at the raw numbers, it looks like he's got a couple of starts and essentially missed out here against New South Wales. So it's a little bit in the eye of the beholder. I know Cameron Bancroft has just finished batting in the second innings against Tasmania, his 4th single-digit score in a row. What a terrible time to go on a rough run when he is a right-hander, although maybe not an aggressive one. The perfect model is a right-hander who would up the ante, I guess, if you're looking at that left-hand, right-hand thing. But if Bancroft had the start of the season as well as he has the last couple, he'd be in a really strong position, given we've moved ever so slightly away from the best 6 batters in the country thing, which was doing the rounds last year, although Cummins said something to that effect this week. But if you are accepting of the view that they're going to pick an opener for real this time, then Bancroft, so unlucky last year, hasn't helped himself this time.
No, he hasn't. And the other thing's in Bancroft's favour. He's actually a very good player of spin.
Yep.
And he's clearly the best fielder in the country, vying for that spot. He's probably the best fielder in the country, not in the 11, regardless of where you place anyone else. And they have a giant-sized hole in the gully with Green not playing. It's one of the underrated aspects of Green being injured is how much they'll miss his catching ability in the gully in a series where there's probably going to be a lot of catches in that area offered, and the catches that are taken are going to be vital in shaping the way the series pans out. So, yeah, that's a big, big blow for Bancroft. To miss out 4 times, he's been out in the same fashion across the board of those 4 innings, and the other innings he had that would be really concerning actually for him was there was a one-day domestic game. I'm not sure if you saw this. WA played Queensland Sunday week ago at the Wacker. He made 33 or 43, which is fine in itself, but he actually got out LBW to Marnus Labuschagne bowling medium pace, missed a straight one. So that is a worry for him heading into a series where he's going to face some of the best fast bowling in the world. So that all of that goes in the mix. But as George Bailey said last week, his body of work stands up and he could turn it around in a very short space of time if he goes out and gets a score against India.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like where, what happened to Matt Renshaw in 2017, and I think again maybe in 2019, if memory serves me correctly, where the position was his until it wasn't on the back of what he did in October and November in the Shield. And it might open the door to something creative. I mentioned Pat Cummins saying during the week about the best 6 batters in the country. Josh Inglis, another 100, and Carey's made 2 already as well. Carey's in terrific nick, averaging over 100 for the Sackers. But Inglis is the interesting wrinkle in all of this. If they want to pick the informed player in the country, one of the informed players in the country, who's already a mainstay of the white ball teams, a World Cup winner in 2023, there might be a model where, Marnus does go to the top. After all of that speculation about maybe Travis Head might open, he didn't open in the Shield game that he played last week against New South Wales. I don't anticipate they'll make a change that wild, although it was seemingly on the cards before Green went down. But whether it's Josh Inglis who jumps out of the pack and they ask him to do a role that he doesn't normally do, but, maybe batting 3 or 4, which would be, well, not 4 because Smith wants 4, but you know what I'm trying to say, that whether they could repurpose Inglis. That'd be a big call, but not completely outside the realms.
It'd be a massive call, and New South Wales coach Greg Shipperd just lobbed it on the table. He who is one of the most credentialed judges in Australian cricket, and his opinion is highly valued. He is a mentor of Andrew McDonald, the coach and the selector, and basically knows everybody and has seen everything in Australian cricket. He has just literally said to a pack of reporters that Josh Inglis should be a legitimate contender to open the batting.
To open, right.
For the first test. Alongside Constance, and he didn't mention any other names, which is fascinating. And he spoke of Inglis's qualities as a player, his ability against international class bowling, which he has shown at international level already in short form cricket. He's got 2 T20 100s batting at number 3 for Australia. The only thing counting against that theory from Greg Shipperd, and I'm not going to question Shipperd's judgment at all, but Josh Inglis has never opened the batting in first class cricket. He's batted at 3 6 times. He averaged 12. I think our high score of about 26 or something. He's batted at 3 once, and he's batted at 4 or 5 7 times. And only made 50 once. All of his success in first-class cricket has come at 6, 7, and 8. 7 of his hundreds have come in those. All 700s have come in those slots. So
where does the primary wicketkeeper? He's batted that list.
So he's a counter-attacking player, more in the mould of a Head and a Marsh. And I would think if one of those players went down in those roles, let's say Marsh, whose ankle is hanging by a thread, let's say something happened to him, if they didn't need the extra bowling, if they were going to back the 4 main bowlers plus Head and whatever Labuschagne could offer, then Inglis would probably come into the conversation. The other name that's been floating around that I think is legitimately a chance to be involved in the Test squad, maybe not in the 11, is Nathan McSween. He's batting 3 for South Australia, putting himself in the hot spot. He's been playing for Australia. He's been captain of Australia. He's going to be captain of Australia coming up. The selectors love him. There is huge regard for him around the country from everybody that's seen him, everybody that's worked with him. He's only 25. He's got 100 already this season, got 72 again against Nisa and Steketee and Swepson this week when Carey got 100 up at Allan Border Field. He's a name that is increasingly gathering momentum as someone who could fill any kind of role in that Australian side.
And look, it might be a lot of conversation around Sam Constas as a 19-year-old prodigy, right? And I get all of that. And the way he batted out here yesterday for, well, must have been at least a couple of hours in tough conditions and after twin tums last week. And, you know, that is at some stage going to be irresistible for selectors. It tends to be with that precocious talent that he is. But McSweeney brings something else, doesn't he? That they see him as potentially not just a player in the Australian team, but, you know, a leader. When you're thinking about who captains Australia after Pat Cummins, I don't think Pat Cummins saw himself leading the Aussie Test team through to 2027. And that now feels like, well, he's said on the record, hasn't he, that 2027 is now something that he's thinking about. So the original model was he would do it for a few years and become the senior pro, and that would be the end of his career, more in the England model. But now it might be that Cummins is doing it in this extended way in the absence of someone else who is commanding the spot. Not sure what that says about Travis Head's chances of being the next captain. No idea what it means about Marnus Labuschagne, although, as most would know, I'm quite fond of that outside-the-box stuff that he does. But McSweeney might be someone, if picked, and if he did succeed at the top level, could have an interesting career trajectory where going from being a member of the ranks to leading the side in a way that others have over the years when they've been identified quite early on as a leader.
Yeah, I had a great conversation with him a couple of weeks ago, before the Shield started, actually, and he was so impressive, speaking about the things that he's learned as a young leader. He got lobbed in to be Australia A captain when he was averaging 28 in first-class cricket. He is the opposite of the usual model for Australian cricket leaders. Normally, they would have picked the player on talent, and that player, like a Ponting or a Clark, has come in so young they've had no chance to lead at domestic level. McSweeney's gone the other way. He's been picked as a leader at domestic level, although this is the first time he's actually captained a Sheffield Shield side this season, but he's been picked as an Australia A captain, and he's captain at under-19 level. They have seen him as a future leader without the batting credentials having matched that standing yet, and now the batting credentials are starting to match the standing. He's starting to stack up a lot of runs. He made 300s last year, averaged 40 in difficult conditions at Adelaide Oval. Adelaide Oval is no longer the flat track that everyone thinks it was way back. It is a very tough track to bat on in Shield cricket now. Averaging 40 at number 3 and making 700 runs there is an excellent return. He's got 100 already, 70 again. If he gets runs for Australia, who knows? And as you pointed out, there is a leadership void in Australian cricket. Every player in that 11 now, well, the 10 players that are going to be picked for Perth that we know about are all over the age of 30. He's 25. There's every chance he could be Australia's next Test captain. He just needs to have the grounding and the runs behind him to make that a comfortable choice.
So if he's the smoky, the outside the square option, which was floated by the man himself, David Warner, look, it's been laughed off by most. I think I asked Chris Rogers about it after play today, the Victorian coach, and he's like, well, that's just Davey being Davey. Pete Lawler was on radio this morning saying that Davey himself was shopping the story around, which is very Dave. It doesn't feel like Moses Henriquez is going to select, I'll reframe that. It doesn't feel like they're going out of their way to want Warner to play for New South Wales next week, which is how Warner framed it in his comments to Ben Horn overnight in the paper. But It feels like this will be a bit of an annual thing. As long as Warner's playing cricket, he'll still be available for selection for one of the Australian teams.
Yeah, it's good stuff from David. Just the content machine, continuing to feed the machine. He's outstanding, David, at what he does, and we're only going to hear more from him as he moves into media roles.
Yeah.
I found the comments to Ben Horn hilarious in the one paragraph or the two paragraphs. He said, "Yeah, I'm available for selection, but also I was happy I retired and I was comfortable with it."
It's very Dave, isn't it? When you can have a conversation with him and you can get all perspectives across 10 or 15 minutes. Well, that is on brand. So, yeah, I can't see it actually happening, but it'll mean that, if they get turned over in Perth and there are those Shield games that follow, I think there's one that corresponds with Perth and one that follows Perth, the day-night one that's around the same time.
Yeah, which is fascinating. 2 day-night games. One, South Australia hosts Western Australia at Adelaide Oval, and the other one is Queensland and Victoria at the Gabba.
Yes.
So runs are going to be hard to come by in that game.
Sure. And then one after that, which I reckon is about December the 6th or something along those lines before the Big Bash begins. That's a day game. Yeah, so, yeah, it's ludicrous and it won't happen. But that'd be the path if he could get himself. But, it's neither here nor there because it's not going to happen. But nevertheless, David Warner always keeping things interesting, always will. Just on the results of the Shield games, by the way, WA have got the job done against Tassie. They were set 83 for victory. They had a wobble. They were 83 for 4, which included Bancroft, and it also included Sam Whiteman, who fell early, the skipper, Mitchell Marsh, which isn't ideal, having made 90-odd last week, missing out this week. Marsh, in the first innings, got 9, so two single-digit scores for him, but they were steered to victory by 6 wickets with Hilton Cartwright, who played a couple of test matches back in 2017, making 39 not out. The other game here at the MCG, mentioned Victoria won in no small part due to the runs on day one from Campbell Kellaway, young prospect coming through. We saw what he was capable of last year. Peter Handscomb, 64. You couldn't rule out, I've just got a feeling he's going to play Test cricket again very soon. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes to Sri Lanka. We were in India last year when I know he didn't make a shitload of runs, taken as a whole, but boy, he batted time in very difficult conditions on multiple occasions, a couple of half centuries across the way. If Gaul, and if it's 2 back-to-back tests in Gaul, and if Sri Lanka need to manufacture 2 results to give themselves a chance at the World Test Championship final, they won't be flat tracks. If they're going to be snake pits, having Handscomb in the squad would seem logical to me.
I'm not a betting man, but if I were, I'd be putting a lot of money on Peter Handscomb batting 5 in the first test in Sri Lanka.
Yep.
He was superb in India. The returns don't look like it.
Yeah.
70 he got in Delhi was first class.
And even the 20-odd he got in the test they won at...
That's right.
The 20-odd, the test they won, remind me where we were? Indoor. In indoor, I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but the way he grinding out 20 across about 110 balls when the game was in the balance, it's all contextualised by those who saw it and watched him fight it out. It just seems to me that if you're building a team to win 2 test matches, you've got to look, and this is where Glenn Maxwell comes into the conversation as well, of course. If they're going to be games that are run in a flurry, and there's been a lot of media reporting around Glenn and playing in Sri Lanka this week, and there'll be more over the weekend, I'm certain. Players like him and Handscomb, it's different to the conversation around the Border Gavaskar Trophy.
That's right. Inglis is another who could play as a definitely given his prowess against spin, but Handscomb definitely. And Chris Rogers just said, we were both at the press conference there, talked about how much he's improved as a player, how settled he is as a person. Now he's 31 and a father. He's coming off a huge year for Leicestershire.
Averaged 80-odd there.
He's had a great start for Victoria, albeit on a flat track, but conditions were difficult the first day at the Junction Oval this season against Tasmania. And then his innings out here, he does it in an unconventional way, but he handled Stark as well as anyone did in this game in that first innings. He played him really well, and that has been his big knock, is how does he handle elite fast bowling. He handled that really, really well. There's very few players who are of his calibre floating around in Australian domestic cricket at the moment. I think you could build a case where he's actually in Australia's best 6 test batters. There's just some specific things around his mechanics facing certain types of bowling, particularly quick bowlers who can attack the stumps, that there's question marks on. But apart from that, you can't fault him. And again, as I said, if they pick a short-term opener for the here and now, someone who handles Australian conditions well, but is like a Harris, but isn't a great player of spin, they then move head to the top in Sri Lanka. Handscomb becomes an obvious choice.
Yeah, and look, I know that when we spoke to Pete at Leicester, I guess it would have been, it would have been before the Ashes last year, he was gutted that things didn't break his way, having played as well as he did in India, but it does, I think, almost reinforce they see him as a type of player who could suit in those conditions. So going through a couple of the other scores in that game, there was a fifer for Sean Abbott in the first innings. New South Wales were all out 136, and that was including a very long-winded 3 by Steve Smith before he was caught behind the wicket from memory, wasn't he, from Fergus O'Neill?
Down the leg side.
Oh, down the leg side, that's right.
Happy with how he played in that. How he moved, how his bat part was going, which was fascinating from Steve.
And Fergus O'Neill, again, always does the job of Victoria. Not express pace, but, I mean, he's someone tall, moves it off the seam, lands it in a shoebox. You couldn't rule out him having a save for Australia at some stage. 4 for 29, Will Sutherland. Back, having missed a lot of cricket with that bad back in the last 12 months, 3 for 24, the captain. Victoria, second time around, 246 with Sam Harper in the runs once more. And Tom Rogers playing his second game, getting his first-class 50. Mitchell Stark, 6 for, bowled the bloody house down. Everyone yesterday was saying that you don't see much better than Stark as he has been through this game.
Got a message from someone who faced him in this game, second hand actually, and just said it was proper good stuff, gas. Did it easy. Sean Abbott said on day one, actually, he was amazed at how easy he did it. Physically, just looks in superb shape. I think compared to 12 months ago, if you remember, he just had to battle through the ODI World Cup. He had a significant niggle. He didn't really reveal much about it, but he was battling a proper issue that changed his run-up and his mechanics, and he just kept fighting through it. Ended up still playing 7 Test matches after that, which was incredible, but he looked in great shape in this game. Everybody was salivating at how well he bowled.
And they were set heaps. New South Wales 383 for victory. Constance batted, as we mentioned before, for a couple of hours for 43 before Murphy picked him up. He danced at Murphy and ended up with a big fat top edge. Josh Ryan Philippi, 88, playing with his old New State. He played for New South Wales from there originally. But yeah, he made runs last week as well. And Sam Elliott took all 4 wickets that Victoria required this morning. They were very happy with the first of Elliott's wickets, which was the Philippi out for 88. They set a 7-2 field and set him bowling wide in the channel and waited and got the edge. So it's always nice when a plan comes together for Victoria. You know, this is a very experienced team now with a lot of guys who played a lot of cricket.
Yeah, but Sam's only young. He's had a huge start of the year. 7 for in the first one-day cup match.
True.
They didn't really factor him into their planning for 4-day cricket, and yet he's forced his way in on form. He's done some great work with Victoria bowling coach Adam Griffiths, who's very experienced in this space in Australia, highly regarded as bowling coach. They've increased his run-up speed and he's added some ball speed as a result. And at his height, if he's in the mid to high 130s, suddenly he's a real handful.
And in the other game, which is still going at the Gabba when we record, so you can almost ignore the analysis here, but South Australia 314 and 352 for 9 declared, including Henry Hunt, who was all the rage a couple of years ago, 136. Had he posted that score last week, it might have been putting himself in that chat, but not quite to be. A 5 for Tom Whitney, Queensland 308. Top scoring there was Jimmy Pearson with 94, Labuschagne 22. So he essentially missed out after getting a start, the Queensland captain. 3 apiece for Buckingham, McAndrew, and South Australia the second time around. 123 not out for Alex Carey, living the dream. What a great time to get back into form, acknowledging that 12 months ago, this was roughly the time when Alex got dropped from the one-day team, did have a tough test summer. There was the half-century out here at the MCG, but for the most part, his returns were diminishing, and just making sure that he's locked down the test spot. Not that it was in any jeopardy, but doing it at the right time.
His 6 months have been incredible. So 98 not out, we were there at Gagley Oval. It was an innings of the highest quality under extraordinary pressure.
Yep.
He's then basically had 6 months off where he didn't play. He went to the MLC, but didn't get a game in that tournament. Then went home, went fishing, spent time with his kids. Went to England, not really expecting to play in the ODI series. Josh Inglis gets injured, picks up a quad injury. He peels off 77 not out, 74, plays as a batter at Lords, misses out when it was nipping around other lines. That's fine. And he's come out and got 90 against Lyon, 111 against Lyon, 42 and 123 not out against Nisa and Steckity.
Yeah.
He's in sensational form. If you get a chance, watch the highlights of Alex Carey's batting from both games so far. He is flushing them. He looks to be moving incredibly well. The ball striking is just superb. He's making good decisions, which was probably his issue 12 months ago. He's making small decisions, but yeah, he looks...
What do you make of Steve Smith's comments? So Smith said after day one here that, and I'm paraphrasing, but he didn't ask to bat number 4. He was perfectly happy opening still, but Marnus and Usman Khawaja both wanted him to bat 4 again, and his preference is to bat 4, but it felt like he was just trying to make clear to everybody that I'm not being emoting little, you know what, he's trying to give the impression, I'll do whatever's asked of me. But in doing so, it does look like there's a bit of a divide in the language between what he's saying and what George Bailey's saying.
Yeah, my understanding is maybe George could have crafted his words a fraction better. What my understanding of what has happened is that Smith was asked how he's feeling after New Zealand. He was a bit unsure. He'd obviously put his hand up to open the batting. That was his call, and they'd never thought of that as an option until he definitively said, "Yes, I'm up for this." I thought he actually played okay, to be perfectly honest. We read some numbers across those 4 test matches. He averaged 28.5. The best opening average across those games was Maguire at 32. There were 3 guys who averaged single digits, and Marnus Labuschagne averaged 16 batting at 3 across those games. So actually, the returns weren't that bad. But it seems with the time across the half a year that's transpired since, that maybe opening the batting, the prospect of Boomer and Shami and Siraj on a bouncy one at Perth, into a day-nighter at Adelaide, into Brisbane, into a really fast wicket in the MCG. Number 4 probably suits him better. He's obviously had conversations with Labuschagne and Khawaja, them saying they hated him there and they wanted him as a safety valve behind them is curious.
It's sort of a lot, isn't it? A lot of weight's being stored in these comments. I mean, it doesn't sort of, I don't know, can you imagine Usman Khawaja getting exercised about this? It doesn't strike me as, I'm sure he expressed a view, but like the way Smith depicted it was that they were really fired up about him going to the opening slot. No one seemed to say this when he was elevated to it 6 months ago before the Windies test.
Yeah, to be fair to Khawaja, he's been pretty strong the whole way through, saying that he didn't like the idea.
No, I understand that, but there's a gap between that sort of saying, you know what I mean? Like it's the import that's being put on those comments. It seems to just strike me as, well, okay, but let's keep things in perspective here.
It was Steve's idea.
Yeah, he said it. He litigated the case. I mean,
absolutely.
He was asked I think we asked him about it on SEN Test Cricket. I'm certain we did. One day after play, and he didn't mind at all getting into the conversation. We were advocating for it on the final word for the same reasons that he ended up almost advancing himself, that he needed another challenge. Another challenge could suit him well. He hadn't been returning the same volume of runs as he had been in I guess there's the you can almost split his career in two, can't you? Until the 2019 Ashes series and since, although there have been hundreds in that window of time, since his return his return to Australia at least in 2019, 2020. But it felt to him at least like he wanted one more mountain to climb. And he wasn't, he didn't look good at all in New Zealand, but carried his bat in Brisbane, missed out in Adelaide. As he said himself, it was a relatively small sample size to abandon ship on a plan that probably would have suited Australia quite well right now, in that there are more players they could pick for the middle order than there are for specialist openers who are banging the door down.
Yeah, that's right. It's a really well put analysis there. It's a funny one. I do think he'll return to number 4 with renewed vigour, knowing how hard it was at the top. I think he's got a heavy dose of reality about how hard opening the batting is. It's a brutally tough job, and that should give him a sense of enthusiasm to get back to number 4 and maybe give him some motivation that perhaps hasn't been there, which you touched on before. Give him another mountain to climb, go back and reclaim that spot that was his. But it is fascinating. I'm curious to hear what Cameron Green sort of thinks about this, sitting over in New Zealand post-surgery going, hey, guys, were you watching in Wellington when I'm at 174 not out? Did you not want me in that spot?
A series-defining kind of landmark moment in his young career, and the whole thing was geared around Green batting 4. Remember when Warner retired, it was like, this is the perfect time to get Green transitioning into the number 4 slot. If and when, I know he's not going to be back this summer, but he will return and he will covet batting at 4 again. You're right, it does add an extra layer of complexity. It may very well be the case, by the way, that Smith's closer to the end than people are thinking. It may well be that, we are watching the very end of Smith's career and there isn't some farewell lap planned for England next year or anything like it, that this is, that he himself knows that we're nearing the end. I'm not saying that, I'm not putting words in his mouth, just that oftentimes with exceptional players, they know themselves when it's the right time to go, and maybe we're getting to that juncture with Smith. I just don't know.
There is one fascinating untold story that just won't happen. If Green had been fit, Smith wasn't going to open the batting.
Right.
We'll never know who was.
Yeah.
But that was going to cause just as much of a stir as this has.
Might have been Green. Out of all of the different scenarios that were being mooted, it might have been Green almost forced to do it in the absence of anyone else, because it was that game of, at the very least, he might have ended up at 3 with Labuschagne opening. That might have been a scenario.
There was 2 options, because Pat Cummins went on the record last week saying that Head and Marsh were never considered. And that was what was relayed to me via some sources that was the case as well. There was basically two options: Green opening the batting, which was a legitimate chance back in January, and he was preparing for it, or Labuschagne opening the batting and potentially Smith batting at 3.
Right.
They're really the only options. It would have been fascinating to see how that unfolded, because Smith wouldn't have got back to the spot that everybody wanted him at, and to the spot that he probably would prefer. And Labuschagne would have had to move as well. So who knows?
A couple of other bits and pieces. You were writing yesterday about the new national pace bowling coach that Australia are looking for. I raised that partly because the Aussie Quicks have been saying this week that it's going to be Stark himself. It's going to be a different kind of season for them, not having Green there. I know that Green didn't play the Pakistan Test matches, but part of the success they enjoyed playing all 7, that's the big 3 Quicks, was that Green did come in to bowl overs against the West Indies and then in New Zealand as well, and they had Mitch Marsh bowling a little bit here and there. But, Stark did introduce the idea of maybe rotation, and Scotty Boland's done himself an enormous amount of good this week if they, at some stage, think that one of them needs a blow.
There's 2 crunch points in this series. One's post the Adelaide Test. I've got a big break between the first and second test, but post the Adelaide Test, depending on how long that goes, it's a short turnaround to Brisbane. Mm-hmm. If they get through Perth and Adelaide unscathed, the big 3 will have to back up quickly through Brisbane, and then it's not that long a break, depending on how that Brisbane game goes, to Melbourne, and then Melbourne and Sydney are a slog. As we know, it happened in the last Border Gavaskar series here at Australia, where Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane came at a rush, and the guys ran out of gas, right? So there will be a crunch point and a decision to make, and given what happened in the previous series against India in Australia, they'll be acutely aware of needing fresh legs if someone is slightly labouring with their loads at some point in that 3rd, 4th test period. So Boland and Neeser will be ready to go. Abbott puts himself in the conversation too. He bowled beautifully here. But yeah, it's something that I do know the Australian hierarchy are certainly thinking about. I think they'll try and push Cummins for 5, obviously, as the captain. And knowing that he's got a baby due, so he'll probably miss part of, if not all, of Sri Lanka.
I didn't realise that. That's a real and present for Cummins and Sri Lanka. I mean,
he's put it on record, actually, saying that he may miss one or both of those.
Oh, right.
Depending on how it goes with...
Gosh, I wonder who captains Australia then.
Yeah.
That is absolutely a conversation for another day. But if Cummins didn't play, does Smith get it by dint of being the senior pro? Acknowledging that I think he would have captained last year had Cummins stepped on a cricket board. I think it would have been head to vice captain.
Smith was going to do it last year. They were explicit in saying that. And Smith did it in India, obviously. He did it when True got COVID, remember? And he missed a test match, another one in Adelaide.
Missed 2 in a row in Adelaide, and then, of course, Pat missed a couple in India where Smith stepped up. But, Smith, anyway, that's it. As I say, it's probably a conversation for another day. But
the management of the Quicks is fascinating.
And the new coach you referred to.
Yeah, it's an interesting... It's a role that I think had existed previously under... Yeah, maybe slightly different title, but it's a unique one. There has been sort of friction between the states and CA about the management of Quicks across the board. There's a conversation that goes with that in that the current contracting model is not quite fit for purpose in the franchise era. In terms of, there's a theory that at the moment you can only contract 24 players under the MOU. And then they upgrade players who qualify through playing a certain number of games. So 8 players qualified last financial year. 3 or 4 of those were fast bowlers. Nathan Ellis, Spencer Johnson, Jason Berrill, all through white ball cricket. The way they rest the big 3, they need a next supply for white ball games. But what happened just recently, all the guys who weren't contracted players were coming off franchise cricket. They were underprepared. They all came in to the UK tour and got injured. And suddenly they had 6 guys go down. Green's done his back and had to go for surgery. So they're looking for a more unified, collaborative approach, and they're hoping that with the appointment of a 12-month-a-year pace bowling coach to sit under the coach, not necessarily tour the team full-time, because Daniel Vettori is the bowling coach when he's not got his franchise commitments. That person will be able to coordinate with the state bowling coaches, with the S&C staff, with the physios, and have a better set of ideas and planning for fast bowlers so that they can be targeted in their prep and how they use people across the year.
That has been a comprehensive segment 1 on the Australian men's cricket team. Needless to say, lots to come in segment 2. The wash-up of the Women's World Cup, Test cricket around the world, the Commonwealth Games, the AGM, plenty more on The Final Word.